the first challenge, of course, is identifying who those marginalized communities are. And to some of us that don't have those identities, they're hard to see even, like we're not always aware of them. So it takes a little bit of exploring communities and doing some research and maybe talking to focus groups to even identify who the marginalized communities are, and then to find representatives from those communities. And I think there's a little bit of an art to the invitation to participate in the co-design process. That it's one thing to say, hey, I'm designing this program, would you like to come and help me design my thing? Versus saying, hey, I have some ideas that are important to me, and I'd like to hear from you what's really important in your community right now, and explore whether or not there are any intersections between our mutual kind of needs and priorities. And focus right on the intersections to start the design process. And so that it becomes kind of really a co-design, not hiring help to do your design thing. So I think that's one of the approaches, and I think there's in this kind of obvious but implied reality that as a designer, I don't know what I don't know. I don't see what I can't see. I have blind spots, and I can't fill in the blind spots myself. I need to have people with different vision and different perspectives and different lived experiences to add to my expertise. And that designing with the margins, with people who represent the margins, is not slowing down the process or diluting the process or adding people to the design process that have less expertise. It's making it better and more effective, and et cetera. So there's like kind of a mindset shift that goes along with the process. The metaphorical example that's not about environmental justice that we use to kind of help frame this approach is it's related to the development of curb cuts in sidewalks. And this happened in Berkeley, California, like a few blocks from where I'm sitting right now, in the 1970s, that sidewalks only had, right angle ledges, and people in wheelchairs were confined to staying on sidewalks and going down driveways and going out into the dangerous street until they could find another driveway and then coming back up. And so there was this movement in Berkeley to petition the city council to develop curb cuts. And the city council said, we'd love to do that. But there's such a small number of people in Berkeley in wheelchairs, it would take a huge amount of money to put curb cuts in every curb in the city for a very small number of people. So there was a little kind of insurrection thing with 5 or 6 people in wheelchairs went out in the middle of the night and poured a concrete ramp off of a couple of curbs and created their own little ramps off of curbs. And it started a small movement. And the city of Berkeley started slowly cutting ramps into curbs. And what they found out was that it really was like survival level essential for the quality of life of people in wheelchairs, but that also parents and caregivers that had strollers loved it. And people unloading trucks with hand trucks to bring products into stores loved them. And joggers all went to the curb cuts to step off the curbs. And now what we know is that like 80% of all the pedestrians in a city walk out of their way to go down a curb cut rather than step off of a curb for any variety of reasons. If you walk with a cane, you know, everything is easier. So when you design at the margins, when you design for the most vulnerable member of your community, there are often these invisible or hidden benefits that that ripple out to a much larger population. So in our world, in our like environmental education world, there's a program at Lawrence Hall of Science where I work called the East Bay Academy for Young Scientists. And it's a program that was developed for middle school and high school age, like teenagers. And we wanted to engage them. This is not a program that I developed. A colleague of mine developed it. And he wanted to develop a program to engage students of color in the city of Oakland and Richmond in science, and in particular in environmental science. And he spent some time like talking to kids and their parents in these communities that had no interest in science whatsoever, really like alienated, disengaged from science. And he spent a long time talking with them about what are the issues in their communities that they care about. And it turned out that they were things like air pollution and toxics and generally living in an unhealthy environment, in unhealthy neighborhoods and communities. And so he built this program, East Bay Academy for Young Scientists, around engaging students in collecting data around their school and in their neighborhoods related to air quality, water quality, and soil quality. And he developed a handful of relatively easy tests that he could do with kids, and they could understand kind of the data collection process and the chemistry behind what they were finding. And they started documenting the environmental justice issues in their local communities. And kind of the lead in water coming out of school drinking fountains, and these things that, like, how could that happen? And the students regularly give presentations of their findings to city councils, school boards, school principals. And in the last several years, he's been taking high school students to the American Geophysical Union conference, which happens every year in San Francisco in December. And his high school students are presenting posters with their findings side by side with graduate students and postdocs at the AGU conference. And so long before I had the language of design at the margins, he was doing this, and I didn't quite understand the principles behind it. But it's a really elegant example of kind of meeting community members where they are, finding relevance, and accomplishing his goals at the same time that he was facilitating those students to accomplish their own goals. Our school system in California, and I think it's true in many other states, does provide additional sources of funding for school systems that serve low-income students. The problem is that all the schools are generally underfunded to begin with. So the extra funding that I'm referring to is often ends up being used to fill a hole rather than trying to provide some new experience. And every once in a while, it gets used for those kinds of enrichment opportunities. But more typically, the funding to address the access issues does come from the NGOs, from the program providers that go to philanthropy and ask for funding to support the participation by low-income communities. So the burden is on the provider of the program to offer scholarships and transportation stipends and things like that. And so there's a dependence on philanthropy for that. So it's, it's kind of it should be the other way around, right? That the government should be providing for the needs of these most vulnerable communities, but they leave that largely to philanthropy. And then when the nonprofits, the NGOs are in the position of raising that money, it often ends up, like I was describing earlier, that the NGO designs a program and then goes to look for funding to get communities of color to come to their program. And so that it misses that kind of co-design relevance piece. And it's surprising to some people that that some NGOs that raise money for scholarships have a difficult time giving it away, because the communities that they're trying to serve aren't that interested in the programs that they're offering. And, like, it sounds nice to go for go to your field trip in the redwoods, but like, we got serious things we're dealing with here. And so if they miss that partnership with the community they're trying to serve, then even the funding for access doesn't overcome all the barriers. The students that participate, that are going to school in low-income communities and communities of color, are often described and identified by their deficits, right? So they're considered low-achieving students, students that are below grade level standards. And in addition to the psychological damage that might do to parents and kids, one of the other impacts that has is that when funding is available, it's always focused on remediation, right? It's always funded on, oh, we can't do any of that really good stuff until they get the basics. So we're going to spend money to hire more literacy coaches to teach them how to spell and do phonics. And we're not going to introduce them to any higher level thinking skills, anything that has broader relevance in their communities, any open-ended projects. That's later, after they overcome their deficits. And of course, with that kind of an approach, kids rarely overcome the label of their deficits. So there's kind of a counterintuitive problem that the real solution for those kids is to provide them with the really engaging good stuff, the higher level thinking, the critical thinking, the inspiration, the relevance that would cause them to want to read and write better, rather than taking it from the other perspective. So I think there are a lot of challenges in our education system. And in addition, among those challenges are that while our society at large recognizes the critical importance of science and technology and environmental health, our school systems have still continued to deprioritize those topics, and really focus almost exclusively on language and math. And it's a hard kind of disconnect to understand why the entire society understands that learning to program a computer is a a pathway to success, but you can only learn how to spell spelling words at school. And so there's like kind of layers and layers. Even for more privileged communities, science is often not prioritized, and the environment is often not prioritized within the school system. It's a hard question to generalize and answer about, because of course different community-based organizations in different communities have different levels of expertise about different things. But I think that the solution is that we bring together partners that have different expertises. And those community-based organizations may know a lot about school systems and may know a lot about standards and curriculum. They might, and they might not, but they definitely know a lot about their community. And the people who know a lot about standards and curriculum development may not know a lot about the community. So I think it's a matter of finding complementary expertises. And when you bring together really smart people that are all smart in different ways about different things, it's really, first of all, you get a better product, but second of all, it's really fun, right? Like everybody's learning from each other, and it can be a really exhilarating experience. And we in meetings that we've had where we invited some of these community-based organizations to come together and partner with their local school systems for the development of environmental literacy, we've heard some of the CEOs and executive directors of these community organizations tell us things like, we're happy to help. Like this, like there is an intersection of priorities and needs, and we're all in. But if you make a call for environmental organizations or environmental education organizations, I don't think we'll respond. Like we don't self-identify that way. We're a clean water organization. We're a safe pathways to school organization. We're a youth development organization. And not only do we not call ourselves environmental organizations, if we do, we will lose credibility and relevance in our community. So the language and the words that we use are really important. And expanding the definitions of what we mean and what we're looking for, and saying what we're looking for rather than using a label for what we're looking for becomes really important. And they've told us, listen, if I call my organization an environmental organization, first of all, a lot of people in my community aren't going to show up, and second of all, my funders aren't going to fund me anymore. Like that's not what their funding priorities are. So like, if that's what you want me to be, I can't be it, but I can help you on the thing that you think that you need help with.